Welcome to the Maria Liberati Show, where food meets art, travel, and life. So what does food mean to you? This week, my special guest is Sousan Abadian. She is a PhD and Native American culture expert, and she's with us to help us celebrate Native American Culture Month and the winter solstice. And I will also be sharing tips for how to save time when cooking meals at home. So stay with me for those, and I just want to remind everyone that I will be doing a special wine pairing dinner at the Ridgewood Winery in Bechtelsville, Pennsylvania on January 29th and February 10th. These will both be 4-course dinners with wine pairing. You can sign up for the events on eventbrite.com. And as always, if you want more info on the event, please feel free to email me at info@marialiberati.com. Stay with me for this week's segments. You know, the holiday season is always a busy time, and as promised, here are my tips on how to save time when cooking at home. When you cook your meals at home, you have control over the exact ingredients and cooking methods used. Because of this, home-cooked meals are often much healthier than a restaurant or fast food meals. However, cooking meals at home is time-consuming. Learning how to quickly prepare meals can help you get great nutrients without having to spend too much time in the kitchen, and it's a better way to stay healthy. So here are some tips. The first one is to understand the recipe. Recipes are very useful if you don't have a lot of experience cooking or don't have time to experiment in the kitchen. Recipes even come with estimated times in which they can be completed. This means that if you follow the recipe exactly, you should be able to make a meal or snack in the allotted time, which is great for a busy schedule. However, if you don't understand the terminology used in the recipe could take much longer for you to complete successfully. For example, you should know the difference between broiling and boiling food. Knowing the difference between these and other cooking methods will ensure that your food has the right texture and taste. Tip number 2 is to create food storage. Keeping food stored in your pantry or fridge can help save you time when cooking. Ideally, your food storage containers will be clear so you can see what ingredients are inside. Putting your different ingredients back in the same place every time can help you memorize where they are. This will save you time because you won't need to search for your ingredients every time you want to cook. The third tip is the alternative cooking methods. Some cooking methods, while not as traditional, are faster than others. For example, boiling food is much faster than pan frying or cooking in the oven. Boiling does not require any special appliances besides a regular pot. Some other cooking methods do require special appliances. One appliance you may want to invest in is an air fryer, which can reduce cooking time by about 20%. Air fryers can also save you time because it cooks food for you without you having to stir it or watch it. While food is cooking in the air fryer, you can prepare other food on the side. As with anything, you will get better at cooking quickly at home the more you practice. Practice chopping, preparing, and cooking things quickly. You can then develop a set of meals you can prepare in 10 minutes or less that still taste great. And you know, this month is Native American Heritage and Culture Month. And I love to honor different cultures. I think it's just so interesting. Each culture has brought to us many things that we may not be aware of. And today I have an expert on Native Americans and Well, Sousan Abadian she has a PhD from Harvard, and she's got such an interesting background. So she's going to share with us some things to honor this month, the Native American Heritage and Culture Month. Sousan, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for inviting me. And I want to just honor you for noting this time and for drawing attention to Native peoples of this land, the original peoples of this land. So thank you, Maria.
Yes, definitely. Well, yes, that's right. They were the original peoples of this land. And, you know, I just want to digress a little bit. So I'm right outside, my home base is right outside of Philadelphia. It's like a rural area. And we have every day we're finding about so much history with Native Americans in this area. And it's always just so interesting. I never really realized, but yes, they were the first real inhabitants of our land. So it's very interesting. And I know I wanted to mention you actually did was it a thesis that you were mentioning?
Yes, a doctoral thesis.
Yes.
Under a wonderful, I had several advisees, but one of them was the Nobel laureate in economics, Amartya Sen. And the doctorate itself was entitled From Wasteland to Homeland, Trauma and the Renewal of Indigenous Peoples and Their Communities.
Wow.
So it talked about the collective traumas that Indigenous peoples have endured, not just on this continent, but also all Indigenous peoples, many Indigenous peoples elsewhere,
right,
and how that has affected their communities. And then that they're restoring themselves in various ways, collectively renewing themselves, culturally renewing themselves.
Right.
So that the thesis was basically that economists, I'm actually trained in economics and government, that economists need to pay attention to the fact that trauma and cultural renewal are an important part of economic development, that we cannot pour money into communities thinking that that's going to restore them if we don't also support them in restoring themselves and renewing their cultures and their peoples again.
Oh, yes. So one of the things that I always love to find out is maybe some history or things that, you know, the culture brings to us that most people aren't going to be aware of or weren't aware of. So are there some things you can share?
Well, I also just want to say, I think you started off by saying that you are becoming aware outside of Philadelphia of the rich Native histories there. And I want to just encourage all the listeners to do that, that you know, wherever you are is at one point belonged to, Native peoples didn't think in terms of owning land.
Right.
You know, they were guardians of land. And so they didn't have ownership. So they don't think that way. But the lands that you are on, once upon a time had Indigenous peoples who, and not that long ago, actually.
No, it's not that long ago.
That land was something that was very intimate and important to them. So all of us should go and find out who those people were, what their traditions were, and honor them in some way, because it's you know, they you know, generously, some of them by force, offered their land so that we can be here. And again, we're speaking positively here, but it was not a pretty picture. Many of them were coerced. Lands were taken away from them. You know, so on and so forth. I know that you want to stay positive on this channel, but it wasn't a pretty picture. And I think it behooves us, those of us who are benefiting from being here. I'm an immigrant. My family came here when I was 5. I'm actually from a Indigenous community in Iran. So I'm from one of 20,000 remaining Zoroastrian Iranians left. And we were the original peoples of Iran prior to the Islamic conquest. And so I'm an immigrant here, and maybe my own history of being an Indigenous person and the suffering that my people's experience makes me, more understanding and compassionate for the original peoples of this land. But I think it would be an important thing that we can all do to do what you've done or beginning to do, to really understand who were the people whose lands we're on. And how can we honor them and give something back to them? So, and I want to thank you for I just want to really appreciate you, Maria, because you're beginning this conversation on your channel. I appreciate that a lot.
Oh, yes, definitely. Well, as I said, I know, I have my culture I'm really proud of, and I try to do as much as I can to research and learn about my own culture, because I think culture, you need to be connected to your culture, whatever your culture is, but not only your culture, but, it's really nice to find out about all the special things that all the other cultures that are out there. They're just so interesting. So I think that's really a really important thing anyway, which is why I like to do that. But yes, there's so many interesting like parks and things, which I'm assuming probably were, originally first owned by indigenous people around the Philadelphia area. They've kept some of them, they've named after like tribes that might have been there. And but you'll go to the parks and there's signs and they'll tell you a little bit about it. So it's just so interesting. But yes, it's definitely important, because I'm sure everywhere in this country that did occur, since, they were the original settlers of our country. So it's really important to find that inhabitants. Yes. And it's important to find that out, because it's a foundation, and I always think your foundation is really, really important. So it's really the foundation of where you come from also.
Absolutely.
So
absolutely.
Definitely important.
There's so many. I don't know if you have a resource section. I should have asked you this before we began speaking, but because I could provide reading material for people who are interested in finding out more, and websites, and there's so many wonderful resources now, both in terms of finding out who inhabited the region that you're in, and learning more about them. I mean, we just had Thanksgiving celebrations, and it has a very different perspective and tone from a Native American perspective, what that tradition is. And it would behoove all of us to learn about actually what did happen in 1621, 400 years ago, by the way. This is 400 years that supposedly that first Thanksgiving holiday was. So it'd be worth, the Wampanoag communities in Massachusetts are the ones who were the peoples who greeted those first pilgrims, supposedly. So they have a whole section on their history, on what actually took place, and how they see Thanksgiving.
Wow.
And again, it's that in itself is a whole long conversation to be had. And I'm not the appropriate person to have it. I'm not indigenous to this continent, but there are many resources out there. And it would behoove all of us to really learn what the history is, the true history of what happened to indigenous peoples, and why they feel the way some of them feel the way they do. And I want to make the point that, of course, Native peoples on this land, let alone the continent, and indigenous peoples all over, there's such a variety, right? Even in the US, the Native communities are very different from one another. You can't generalize in any ways. And then also there's been a lot of mixing of peoples. One doesn't want to generalize about Native peoples, but there are certain things that one can speak about. Their history is of what happened after settlers came, and after conquest, the U.S. conquest of their communities. That's been similar, and the trauma to them has had deleterious effects that one can generalize about. But their cultures are very distinct. And so beautiful. Foods, how they raised, how they fed themselves, how they nurtured themselves. So all those things are very different and fascinating, and it would be really interesting for each of your community, your listeners, to go and see what were the original foods that were of the land.
Well, could you share with us? Do you have any insight on that? Like anything? I know we chatted about that a little before we started the interview. Some different foods is there anything you could share with us?
Well, for example, I think that, turkey was not part of the meal, the original meal, Thanksgiving meal.
Probably not, yes.
It was probably geese, fowl, geese, or, duck and venison.
Yes.
So that sort of thing, squash, pumpkin, all those things, of course. there's a whole list. There's also a wonderful a chef. I think he's called the sous chef, and his name is Sean Sherman. And he's obviously an amazing chef, and he's written a book. But he's got a lot of he talks a lot about indigenous foods, and it would be worth looking him up and learning about that. He's fascinating. You might actually interview him. He'd be
yes, that would be a great idea. I'll have to definitely look him up. But yes, also as a side note, if you do want to share any information or links with me, I'll put it on my website.
I will do that.
Because we have a website for the podcast, the marialiberatishow.com, and we'll include it there and on my website as well. So people can definitely find out more about the Native American culture and heritage. But it's interesting how I think many cultures, almost all cultures, there's always trauma, and it's, the way that they get over the trauma is interesting also, because each culture has its own variety of traumas, and not to what's the right word? Not make it important, the one that the Native Americans went through, but I think all cultures, it's kind of the same thing. There's a trauma, and then how they deal with the trauma and getting over that. And but I know there's a lot of very interesting, as I was mentioning places to visit, and hopefully it sounds like, and you may be the person that would know, it sounds like that they're recovering and things are kind of, going along with people recognizing the Native American culture in this country more and more. Is that correct?
I think there's a beginning. I mean, we have for the first time, for example, Deb Haaglund, who's the minister, the Interior, Department of Interior, head of Department of Interior. And so we're starting to we're very beginning of having people in positions of authority in the government. So even that's great representation of something shifting. But I've written all about, I'm my expertise is, it's not what I intended it, but it turns out one of my expertise is collective trauma and the traumas that people have experienced and recovery from collective trauma.
Yes.
And the fact is there are different kinds of collective traumas.
Yes.
And some are worse than others.
And others.
And I mean, you don't want to compare anybody's traumas, right?
Right.
If they drowned under 20 feet of water or 3 feet of water, they still drown.
It's still, yes.
Yeah. So I get that trauma is trauma. And yet there are types of collective traumas that are harder to recover from.
Yes.
So part of what the indigenous peoples, from my estimation, is some of the worst kinds of collective traumas that anyone could experience. And it's related to I don't know, most Americans don't know, we don't want to talk necessarily about this stuff, but it's important. It's not about feeling guilty or badly, but it's about really understanding all of our people. I mean, they're a community, the Native people,
right? Exactly.
And,
yes,
and they've suffered inordinately. And one piece of history I'll mention, because most people don't know about this. We know about their lands being taken and their foodways being destroyed and all sorts of things, and not from 60 to 90%. I mean, it's hard to even fathom this. 60 to 90% of their people were wiped out. By the diseases that Europeans brought to this land.
Wow.
And we had 777 at this point, 777,000 people die from the pandemic. But that's if we imagine 60 to 90%, 60%, 2/3 is 1 million something people die. Can you imagine that level of devastation? That's just
back then. Yes.
Yeah. 2/3 of your community wiped out just from the get-go. Exactly. And then one of the other damages that most people don't know about, and I'm just going to bring this up lightly, but it's not light, is that by law, beginning in the 1890s, many children were forcibly removed by family. It was law for Native children to be taken to boarding schools away from their families.
Oh my God!
Basically, be Christianized and kind of have the native beaten out of them. And many of these children, actually, the first generations of these children that were removed, 50% didn't survive these schools. They were that horrible.
Oh, wow.
And so there was a lot of abuse, and this went on for several generations before the law was changed. But
right.
Can you imagine the damage to families and communities and to cultures where children were taken away into missionary and also military schools, and in many ways brutalized.
Right,
and then returned back to their communities. They didn't speak they could not speak their language.
Wow.
They could not practice any of their culture.
Wow.
So this is a, so we saw an epidemic of alcoholism and other things devastate those communities, but who wouldn't want to numb themselves after those sorts of experiences? So we have to understand what these communities have been through.
Yes.
And it's a real testament to their resilience that they are coming back in amazing ways, and they have so much to teach us. I mean, so much to teach us.
Right.
And we have to respect and listen to them. And I think that's what I want to, emphasize.
Yeah, I think it's important to obviously to know about the history and the foundation and things like that. But I think it's also important, right, to hear, to honor the culture and the positive things that the culture brings to bring to us today, because thank goodness, we're not in those times now. So
that's right.
We're not, the people that did all that are not around. So we can kind of be on another level and, experience the knowledge and the wisdom and the culture, the benefits of their culture that they could bring to us. So that's why I enjoy honoring different cultures and trying.
So beautiful that you do, and they have a lot to teach us about their relationship to the land.
Yes.
Which we desperately need at this time.
Yes.
The honoring of the elements. I mean, we are, the Western culture, as beautiful as it is and has so many, valuable pieces to it as well. Right. It has a dysfunctional relationship to the natural world in some ways. And
yes. I love, one thing, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but one thing please. I love from what I understand. So they honor trees, right? Don't they think of them as, is that correct?
Absolutely. I mean, indigenous peoples all over the world understand and honor. I mean, they may not have understood that they call them the giving people. I mean, trees give everything to us. They give us oxygen. They give us foods. Yes. They give us, I mean, we couldn't survive without trees, right?
Yes.
And they understood this. Yes. And so there was a lot of reverence for the natural world, and rightly so. Yes. And it wasn't about just taking from animals or from trees it was a lot of prayer and appreciation and respect. Right. Before taking the life of an animal, after taking the life of an animal. It was just not done without thought and consideration.
Yes.
For the life form that was there. And so the earth is considered sentient, and it's to be respected. The earth itself is our mother. Everything we have comes from it.
Yes.
And so how would we treat the earth differently if we really got that yes. We can't just dig into her and pull out stuff. And, if we just really honor the earth yes. for what she has given us, it's a very different understanding. And so land becomes different, how yes. the trees, we don't just cut trees randomly down, yes. We don't just exploit things. We understand what they've given us. And so anyway, there's a real appreciation for yes. animals, for trees, for even the rocks. They consider, some nations consider rocks as record keepers. I mean, if you think of it, they've been there before anything else. They've seen everything. They're the record keepers. They have seen from beginning of time to now.
Yes. That's absolutely right. Yeah. When I started finding out about the way that they treat trees, after that, I look at trees a whole different way. And you almost, because I understand that I think they actually talk to trees and, because they revere them. And I have to think like many times before I cut one down anymore because of thinking in the terms, that they make you think of, and you could understand because it is a living, breathing thing, really. And you're right. It does give us so many things, but it's such definitely a
so beautiful.
Yes, it is.
You're so beautiful that you're open to this. And
yes,
it's really, there's a lovely book by Jamie Sams. Anyway, I will put, she has something called the Sacred Path cards. Yes. And animal medicine cards, and it's a different perspective on animals, and some of the native teachings. Anyway, might be worth having that as part of the resources that people look at.
Yes, definitely. I would even, I would be very interested in that. But yes, if you have any links or anything that you want to send me, I'll definitely get it up when we air this podcast. I'll definitely get that up. Well, this has been lovely. Thank you so much. But I want people to know where they can find you and get more information. Is it SousanAbadian.com?
That's so simple. www.Sousan, and Sousan is with an O, so SOUSAN, ABADIAN.com. And they can sign up for newsletters and that sort of thing. And I'm looking forward to putting whatever resources I can on your website so people can follow. And by the way, we're all indigenous to the earth. And we at one point had, we were all connected in some of these ways to the earth. Yes. We've just forgotten it. And we've been misled in some ways. So we are all there, we can look at them as our teachers to remind us of who we really are and our relationship to the mother, to the earth mother. As you are. And we can still stay Italian, whatever, any culture we come from, and still remember that we have a relationship to the earth in a special way. So
that's our first culture, really, our first real mother is Mother Earth, really. Our, one of, I guess, that's our culture, really, is, our first culture, whatever other culture you respect. But yes, definitely. I've always said people need to be more connected to, the food and the earth and all that. It's people don't realize there's not a connection. And I think that's one of, our many issues today. People really need to feel, have that connection there. So
absolutely.
But yes, with all, if you can send us some links and all, maybe hopefully we'll get people to explore that even more.
Very good. And again, want to so appreciate that you have, first of all, honored me by having me here, but also are bringing attention to this, Maria. It's such a valuable piece of work that you're doing.
And it's the month of November that is the, okay. So, well, this will probably air, but that's okay. That's okay. At least we were able to get it in. So that's very nice. Great. Yes. And thank you so much. And keep us posted on your, whenever your books come out, let me know. We'll have you back on. Great. Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to the Maria Liberati Show, and thanks to my producer, Britton Roselle, and this week's special guest, Sousan Abadian, in helping us celebrate the winter solstice and Native American Culture Month. Don't forget my special events, my wine pairing dinners that will be held at the Ridgewood Winery in Bechtelsville, Pennsylvania on January 29th in the new year and February 10th in the new year. And you can sign up for those events on eventbrite.com or email me for more info at marialiberati.com. And as always, you can find me at marialiberati.com. You can find my Gourmand World Award-winning book series, The Basic Art of Italian Cooking, at marialiberati.com, at artoflivingprimamedia.com, and really anywhere books are sold on Amazon and Kindle as well. And you can also find me on Instagram at Maria Liberati, on Facebook at Chef Maria Liberati, on Twitter at Maria Liberati, on Pinterest at Maria Liberati, The Basic Art of Italian Cooking by Maria Liberati channel on Roku, my YouTube channel, which is the Maria Liberati channel, and my Vimeo channel, the Maria Liberati channel. And as always, until next week, peace, love, and pasta.